Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. Today's episode is Limitless Growth, Building the Business You Want in the Life to Match. It's a conversation with Stephanie Bogan, the founder of Limitless Advisor. I'm Louis Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for financial advisors.
At Diamond Consultants, our mission is to help advisors live their best business life. We want every elite advisor to find exactly the right place for their business and their clients to thrive, whether it's at a wirehouse, a regional, boutique, or independent firm. As the industry's leading recruiters and consultants, we've transitioned more than $250 billion in assets under management in the past decade, and each year, 25% of transitioning advisors who manage $1 billion or more are our clients. If you'd like to talk, please feel free to give us a call at 908-879-1002. Are you a financial advisor who's curious about whether you're in the best place to serve clients, or if there might be a better way to optimize your business for the future? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a new book that serves as a self-guided journey, walking you through the key steps that Diamond Consultants takes with our advisor clients, whether considering change or not. Visit diamond-consultants.com/the-book to learn more.
In our world, growth is usually measured in hard numbers, assets, revenue, headcount. But over time, we've found that the most successful advisors are those who define growth more holistically, designing their businesses around the lives they want to live, rather than the other way around. It's a timely conversation, especially as more advisors confront the realities of burnout, blurred boundaries, and growth that doesn't always feel fulfilling. In this episode, I'm joined by Stephanie Bogan, founder of Limitless Advisor, and one of the most respected voices in advisor coaching. At age 24, Stephanie built a consulting firm and sold it 12 years later for 7 figures, joined their executive leadership team and played a pivotal role in scaling their offerings to thousands of advisors, and took on the SVP role of training and client experience at United Capital. And then she made a dramatic life shift. If all that wasn't enough, Stephanie moved to Costa Rica to design the lifestyle she once only coached others to pursue. Today, Stephanie works with advisors across the industry, helping them grow with greater freedom, clarity, intention, and purpose. She's founded her successful practice on the belief that the key to greater success and happiness lies in mastering mindset plus methods. And in case you needed a second opinion on her impact, Stephanie is also Michael Kitces' coach. In this episode, we talk about how success is 85% mindset and why that one shift can transform how you work, lead, and live. Stephanie shares strategies for reframing negativity, avoiding burnout, and building a business that scales smartly without sacrificing your sanity. She also reflects on her own journey, including the personal pivots that gave her a clearer path forward, and how those lessons now shape her work with advisors. Whether you're considering a new path or looking at ways to refine your current trajectory, this conversation offers a powerful reminder that growth isn't just about doing more, it's about being more intentional with what you build. Let's dive in. Steph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure to see you again.
You too. Been looking forward to this. You are a mainstay at industry conferences. You always pack the rooms. You're an incredible coach. You and I had the privilege of working together. So this should be a fun one. I think a wide-ranging conversation.
Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's start at the beginning. You've had a really interesting career arc. You founded your first firm, Quantuvis, sold it, and then later joined Joe Duran at United Capital. Can you just walk us through your journey and what each chapter maybe taught you about yourself or about what you're ultimately doing today?
Yeah. I guess if I had to give it a story, it would be the pretty common one of ambition, burnout. We'll call it reinvention. Michael Kitces, who's also a client, calls it my encore career, which is a great name. I think what it really boiled down to is if you've achieved any level of success, you know that there is something that inherently drives you. And that led to an incredible little, relative to where I started. I literally grew up in a trailer park. My mom was diagnosed with a mental illness when I was 9. My dad had PTSD from Vietnam.
So the next 9 years were a combination of panic attacks, psychiatric hospitals, and not so pleasant things. So I moved out at 17 on my own. I got a job as a receptionist in an insurance office that beat Little Caesars, which I had a very short and unhappy stint at. I was very good with the register and not so good at everything else. So I learned very quickly, right, what side of the career I wanted to be on, and it was on the front of the counter, not the back of the counter, which is really interesting because one of my mentors actually said to me, just a side quip, he said, Stephanie, there are two sides to any business, the money going inside and the money going outside. If you want to make real money, always stay on the money going inside, which I thought was pretty sound advice. So for me, success was survival. I literally, from the time that I was 9, was taking care of my baby sister, had just been born. So to me, it wasn't, I had grand plans. I got accepted to some great colleges. That just didn't pan out because I didn't know how to fill out student aid forms. So nonetheless, really just set out. Very long story. Ended up working in a large international law firm. My plan was to be a lawyer. Decided not to go that route and actually ended up working. This was literally how I landed in my current profession. Dumb luck. I actually took a job as an office manager, if you can believe it, to start. That's what they were hiring for. I convinced them they didn't have enough office to manage. They needed a director of marketing and operations, which at 24, I was wildly qualified to do with the deep set of experience that I had. But I did know more than them, it would seem. And they were inclined to give me the opportunity. God bless you, Galen. And that literally began my career. We worked in estate planning and planning in the ultra high net worth space. So it was an incredible foray into learning the ins and outs. I've literally funded private jets, which is a really interesting process. I don't recommend if you don't have to do it. So I got to really understand the intricacies of wealth through the technical lens of estate planning and insurance and financial planning and investments and the accountants, which was just a great steeping, if you will. And we had this incredibly talented team, but we were not good at growing, running the business, or marketing. And so why I took that on, I have no idea, except that I seemed to be pretty good at it and it worked. So I like to learn through what I call the science of failure. And what I mean by that is so many, even of the strategies that we use today, were literally honed in that space, which we can talk about, because I simply, it turns out, don't like things that don't work. I like things that do work. So instead of hitting my head on stuff over and over, I would hit my head a few times and then I would, right, just jump in and through the science of failure and time and trial and error, figure out what really did work. So I did that for a few years. Long story short, grew that firm, spoke at a conference on how to grow a market and grow a practice, which 20 years ago, it was almost 30 years ago. It was pretty revolutionary for small practices. Again, I'm dating myself. I'm 52 now. I truly just had a birthday. And so I spoke and people came up and asked me questions. And I was like, I had just bought my first house. So I was driving an hour. And Galen at the time said, you're going to go work for the company that runs the conference. You're going to become a consultant. And I said, no, I'm not. I love my job. And they invited me to speak at a conference 6 months later, which I did. And 3 weeks after that, I gave my notice and started what became Quantivus Consulting. Then when I started, it was very multidisciplinary. We worked with attorneys, accountants, insurance, and advisors. And just really quickly, right, people in finance had problems I could solve and they had money to invest in their practices and they were willing to do it. So that very quickly became the gravity. And I've been doing that for literally 30 years now.
And then you decided to sell the business, correct?
Yeah. So let's see. In 96, I think I was 30. So I started the business at 24. When I was 36, I was approached by Genworth, which was a Fortune 200 company at the time, for acquisition, which I hadn't planned on, but I was a business person. So for a lot of reasons, the biggest of which was I wanted to play on a bigger field. And I really wanted to see if I could scale what I had done in consulting on a much bigger level and get adoption and results. That was the next big professional challenge. And as most of anyone knows, what we did at United Capital was very cool. And so really, I started at Genworth, joined the executive team there for 4 years, took a year off, traveled the world to scuba dive with my kids. Then Joe called literally, Turks and Caicos. He's like, hey, I have the perfect job for you. And I said, how could that be? And he said, because I invented it just for you right now. And I was like, okay, fine. So basically, I ran training, the advice model. We built out the client experience, honest conversations, money minds, what ultimately the guidebook, what became the FinLife platform, which was really revolutionary at the time. And I still think is best of class in terms of right value, client experience, and integrating behavior in a way that any advisor can effectively implement, which was, I think, the secret sauce there, not just building a really great advice model in CX, but we had to build it so that any advisor that joined us, required or got hired, could implement it effectively, from the junior person with almost no experience to the guy who'd been doing life planning for 30 years to the investment firm that had never even done financial planning. That was the audience I had to build this process for. And it was a deep behavioral process. And it is literally it was one of the funnest things I've ever done. If anyone else wants to do something cool, let me know, because I need to scratch an itch to do something like that again. But that was really the foray into United Capital. Was Joe was like, I have a vision. I want to build this kind of client experience. And I was just all about that. So yeah, and then I was there for about 3 years. We'd gotten the third round of funding, which was about 40 million. And part of my job was also to vet every firm, and I had to sign off on every firm coming over to United that they would get into the model and felt like we could get them there and that would be additive to everybody, which was a pretty big responsibility. And one I took really seriously. So when we got that third round of funding, there was a lot more. I need you to go here. I need you to meet with this firm. And so Joe and I had a really nice sit down, and I had two very young kids at the time. I'd already sold a company. I was financially independent and I was successful, and I was doing literally some of the best work in my career. But Lewis, I was so stressed out. I was breaking out in rashes. I was getting migraines. I was have like life altering questions at the playground. Do I have lymphoma? Am I going to literally, I'm at the playground. I'm not kidding. I'm at the playground with my son. So I'm doing this incredible work. I love it. Super high stress. Like the cool thing, Joe is an incredible visionary. When people ask me to describe United Capital, I'm like, just strap yourself to the rocket. That's what it was. It was a rocket ride to the moon with all that comes with that. So I was accomplishing personally. It turns out this is the big, I'm going to pull it all the way back around for you. It was not working for me personally. I was successful beyond any measure I had ever imagined. I had millions of dollars. I was respected. I was on the cover of magazines. I was industry influential. Bloomberg asked me to write a book because Mark Demerjen told him to call me when he stopped. Like, I was at the apex of my career, as Joe liked to say. Like, why would you walk away now? You're at the apex of your career. I don't know that this will be the best thing for your career. And he was being genuinely caring. And I looked at him, I'll never forget. And I said, it may be, but it's going to be the best thing for my life. Like just that balance. So I'm at the playground, I'm breaking out in hives. I have no idea why. Google is so dangerous in these situations. And it's like no symptoms, full body rash, stage 4 lymphoma. I was crying like I'm going to die. I've missed my kid. Like just insert every movie you've had about having the wrong set of priorities here. And look, I was a good mom. I was present, but I was just so driven. The company and the goal or the next corner was everything. And I had an amazing life and I had time, right? Which is something a lot of people don't have. But I had success that I hadn't learned how to enjoy.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
I had learned all this other stuff. So at the apex of my career, as everyone loves to say, go Google the articles. I literally walked away from it all and I moved to the beach in Costa Rica, which it turns out was the best thing I ever could have done through the lens of I did something a little bit unusual. I sat down on the beach and I opened my laptop. I'll never forget it. I remember it perfectly. The sun streaming through the leaves as if heaven was talking to me, waves on the ocean, like it was magical. And I Google in this fairy tale moment, dear Google, how to be successful and happy, because I hadn't figured it out. And it turns out Google does know the answer to everything. It led me to an article, which led me to a lot of basically years of deep research, literally copious amounts of hours, basically getting my own degree in the science of success, right? There's so much neuroscience, performance, behavioral psychology, now that there was not 10 years ago, even, and it's like really radical. But here's the crazy cool thing. The game changing thing came from 1906. So Carnegie, you may be familiar with, right? Very wealthy man. Turns out he was into growth and development. He wanted to start an engineering university, but he understood that people learning and changing and adapting, we weren't good at that as humans. So he used his considerable wealth to do a study called Education and Engineering. It was done in 1906, and the outcome of that study fundamentally changed the course of my life. So I'm reading the study, and here's what it says. Of the things that we need to sustain and affect change, success, get a degree, get a better body, build a better bank account, be in a better relationship, right? To learn how to move from here to there were three factors that contributed to our success. First, what you knew and where you were. Being dumb in Dubai is different than being brilliant in Budapest. Cool thing is, those are changeable factors, right? But they're factors that actually influence, right? Steve Jobs literally grew up in Palo Alto. What would have happened if he'd grown up in India, right? There probably wouldn't be an Apple. He'd probably have a monastery. So, what you know and where you are really matters. Two, skills makes perfect sense. Love that one because you can acquire them, get them. I don't know how to do it. I can go learn how to do it. Third, psychology, mindset. I was like, yeah, whatever. I've read that book or two. No big deal. Here was literally mind-blowing part. Of those three factors, our success is 85% attributable to our mindset. 15% to what I call our methods, where we are, the skills we have, who we know.
That's crazy.
I had spent 20 years being a successful, like, how do you do everything best, which is a story I'll tell you in a second. And this was a whole door that I had heard about. I read a book here or there, but all of a sudden I was like, so there's an entire branch of my brain that is in charge of everything. I know nothing about it. And it's responsible for everything that I am experiencing in my life right now, like the stress and the worry and the anxiety. And I can't, like, why can't I just be happy and successful? Why does it have to be this terrible trade off, right? It can be a present mom who's retired and happy, or I can be stressed out, but really successful.
It does seem like a struggle that a lot of advisors, but just a lot of people in general experience, right? They think that when they get to the next production level, I get to $1 million of production, 5 million, a billion in assets. I make $1 million a year. I make $3 million a year. I do an acquisition. I grow my team by 30%. That suddenly something's going to click and you're going to be happy. But none of it matters if you're burnout, if you're stressed. And like you said, mindset is such a big contributing factor. If your mindset isn't dialed in, you can have the CFP and the CFA and all these designations and be an amazing planner and subject matter expert. But if you think that you're not great at what you do or you're always chasing something, what's the point? And so I would assume that kind of the learnings that you had in your life from founding your company, selling it, working for Joe Durant at United Capital, that's ultimately what inspired you to start your current company, Limitless. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And here's what I essentially learned. There's no business solution for being personally satisfied. I tried. If there was a medal, I'd be on the podium. I promise. I worked hard. I worked long, but I worked and I worked and I did everything I thought I was supposed to do, right? I made the money. I was a good person. I got a house on a hill. I have a beautiful family. Check, check. I checked all the boxes. And I was like, I don't understand. I did my part. Where's the happy, joyful part that I thought was going to be here when I arrived, whatever that meant? And yeah, so I was full time in Costa Rica for 7 years. I unretired. I retired full time for 5. I literally ran the PTA and practiced the conjugation of my Spanish verbs. And when I hit that wall, I unretired, which was a really good excuse to stop getting better. Check conjugation is killer, man. And then a couple of years later, I started doing some private client work with Michael Kitces, for example, similar to the coaching that we did, which is really about up leveling that next level of leadership. He joked that he was really successful in the aggregate. He loved everything that he was doing, but it didn't feel breathy, which is a cute, funny word for Michael to use. But I think it really embodies what a lot of us feel. And for me, it was a multi-year journey. But the reason that I started Limitless was so that I could give everyone the shortcuts that I didn't have the good sense to figure out. A joke that I learned through the science of failure. That is the example. And there's a lot of deep stories in there about my personal learning. But what I ultimately learned is that the science of our success lies in our own behavior. So to your point, when we want to up level our business, we tend to push harder, work longer, put more pressure on our team, and that will get you an incrementally better result, which year over year will get you a bigger, better firm. For most of you, show up, you do a really good job between markets, referrals, and share of wallet. 10 or 20 years later, you have a pretty nice firm. If you're good at growth, you have a billion or a multi-billion dollar firm. If you've got into strategic acquisitions, you've grown from there. That trajectory is now established. We know how to build $1 billion firm. I can do that like a checklist. The emotion is what hangs people up. I'll come in and say, we need to realign this. We need to change this structure, your team model, your client. And they're like, whoa, you want me to change things? And I was like, yes, you're paying me a fair bit of money. My job is to add value. You don't need me to keep things the same. And then I'll get Lewis, someone will bring me in to solve a problem. I'll talk to them and then they'll be like, well, and they'll rationalize and justify. And I will say very simply, how's that working for you?
Yeah.
How's that working for you? If it's working for you, great. But here was the personal part of my learning was for me, I started doing the mindset work, which is what was driving that success. And why can't I turn it off? That's what I call the edge. And I think it is the great dilemma of all entrepreneurs and business owners. If you are ambitious in any way, which you probably are if you're successful, there's a little fire that drives you forward. It's why we get up and do things that other people do not get up and do, right? We ride the crazy coaster, as I like to call it. What was that? We want to turn it off. I remember sitting with my daughter. No joke. I'm in her this was one of the things that prompted my departure. She was crawling and she was just learning to crawl. And she was on the other side of the room and I was sitting there and at the end of the day, I was having a conversation in my head about work with work. I don't even remember what it was, but it was like there was a whole movie going on in my head and my daughter's crawling around and I cannot make this up. The next moment, she's in my lap, like tapping me, like, mommy. And I was like, oh my God. I was at work, but I was in that was not the experience I wanted to have with my children for go back to insert my childhood, not that awesome. Didn't want that to be my kids' childhood and certainly didn't want my experience as a mom to be something that I looked back with all my success later and deeply regretted. Like I at least had the good sense to know I might regret this. I should figure it out. And that hence began the journey. And so for me, what I ultimately had to learn, which I think is what we all want, is we want to just go to work, kick ass, take names, have impact, make great money, deliver deep value. And we want to turn it off and be light and go hiking and hang out with our spouse and our kids and be present and grounded and wholehearted and conscious on the inside as opposed to the and all the stuff that happens in our head that keeps us from truly being present and engaging with ourselves, with our families, with our team, and if we're being really honest, with our clients. Right? I just did speaking engagement, thousands of people. I asked them this question: how many of you spend as much time as you would like with your top clients? Like you feel you've got it all covered, planning, personal, CX, like we're good, nothing more to add. Thousands and thousands of people, 3 people raised their hands. I'm sure 2 were fibbing just to show off. Right, right. Nonetheless, most people are radically honest and self-report that they don't. And then it's because I'm too busy and I'm stuck in the seat and the day-to-day grind. And I'm like, those are all excuses because they are 1,000% solvable. I know because I solve them all of the time. They require we change our behavior, which ultimately means this was what I learned. We had to change the way that we think. So to me, what I learned, and here was the underbelly of that study, the research is that on average, you and I have about 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those thoughts, Lewis, are negative, and 95% are on a constant replay loop in the back of your mind. You're not good enough. You can't, you shouldn't. Clients won't let you do that. If you don't take the clients that are too small, the COI will never refer again. Like, right. So literally the script, the stories, in research, we call them internal representations of reality. I call them BS, belief systems, and some of that other stuff, right? Most of the stories in your head, the conversations you are curating day in and day out are not friendly. The voices in your head are not waking up. They're like, Lewis, you are such an incredible leader. You're going to 10x this company while maintaining culture and lifestyle. Your clients are just going to love you. We got some hard stuff to do today, but we're game on. We got this, man. That is probably not what the inner dialogue says if you're like most humans. You might be sitting there going, okay, she went and she lost me. And I'm just going to own that because I did. I was that person. I was like, no way. Now I'll tell you, I will try all of the science as long I just am looking for what works.
I love the personal journey, how it led you with a very strong calling and in your why story to help others. And the people you knew to help were financial advisors. So it sounds like what part of what you're saying is that success doesn't have to be that hard. I think a lot of people think that it does, right? I have to work 80 hours a week in order to be successful. I have to not see my kids sometimes because I want to be successful. I have to not enjoy elements of my job. But it sounds like what you're saying is advisors and anyone really has a choice. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's think of it as an invisible force field, right? So to me, for my reflection, the reason I shared that science is those stories, those belief systems are actually governing everything that you be, have, achieve, and experience silently in the corners of your mind. And most of us aren't even aware that's what's. So when I found out that there was like a secret room in my brain that was responsible for 85% of my success, you could be damn sure that I was like, I need to become an expert on that room in my brain. I need to fix all these uncomfortable feelings, was what it essentially boiled down to. So for me, and this is not true for everyone, but it's pretty common, it turns out success was a search for significance, right? It came from a trailer park. I didn't want to be the trailer girl, like all that stuff. And money, I somehow thought was going to give me meaning, right? It was going to fix that sense of inadequacy or not being good enough or what, oh, God forbid, what if you all actually saw me in my imperfections? So our brains are hardwired to avoid that, right? So all that science basically says on an average day, you are hardwired to survive. You have one brain, but you have two minds. So your limbic system, right, the back is the caveman part of your brain. It's the oldest part of your brain evolutionarily. It turns out it's in charge 70% of the time on any given day because we're stressed, even at a light level, according to the research, 70% of the workday. That was pre-COVID. I could argue it might be harder now. So 7 out of 10 times we're what I call below the line. Draw a line on a piece of paper and think about all your good feelings. I'm abundant, I'm wholehearted, I'm joyful, I feel balanced, I'm getting good work and home time, right? Like, yay, below the line. Fear, uncertainty, doubt, anxiety, stress, like all of that surfaces. That's where we spend, think about the stories in our head and our state of being during the day. We're in stressed out survival mode. So, biologically, the chemicals in our brain are adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol. Those are your fight or flight chemicals. No joke. So, here's a good example of how our behavior shows up in our business, which is your largest client calls, leaves a message. Assistant says, sounded like they needed to talk, but didn't say why. It's the first thing you think.
They're going to fire me.
You're in every time, I'm going to get fired. Something bad's going to happen because your limbic system, the caveman part of your brain, has one job. Do you know what that job is?
To survive.
Don't die. Literally, you don't need better berries. We don't need a better cave. We just need to not die today. Right. So all it's doing is scanning the environment for threats. That's why you check email 17 times a day, by the way, which is yet another story. Right. So all it's doing is looking for threats. And if our filter is not calm, clear, conscious, and confident, it's going to find them all day long. Largest client calls. Here's what your brain said. Oh, shiznit. Something bad's going to happen. Right. Fight or flight. When you go into fight or flight, no matter what it is, your assistant comes in and you're like, oh, something's wrong. Immediately, the brain from your prefrontal cortex, the logical Einstein thinking CEO of your brain, this is your planning, your logic, all the blood that makes it work rushes from your cortex to your muscles and your heart. So you can fight or flee. You cannot beat up the prospect or the client, and you can't run from them. Like, compliance isn't like that, right? So what do? We panic and we go into this right below the line, fearful, like I got to call the client. When you're in a happy above the line state, it's dopamine, serotonin. I'm happy. It's all good. So we go into our most important interactions, good or bad, stressed out with our thinking brain turned off and our caveman brain turned on and running the show. I would just argue that is not going to get us our best outcome. We can reframe that, which is just a different story. Lewis, if advisors are listening and someone gave them millions of dollars, it probably means they trust them. In fact, if my client is calling me, that means that he or she is actually doing what I said in the beginning, which is, hey, you're going to give me all your money. I'm going to be your guy or your gal. You're going to call me. I am going to be here for you. Game on. Even if it's a tough conversation, that's my job. That's actually what I get paid the most for, is to have the tough conversations. So I need to welcome and embrace them and be confident in having them because it's a regular part of my job. So that's an entirely different frame. Oh, Bob's calling. I really wonder what's up. This is pretty unusual for him. Let's check in right away. I'm so glad he's calling. My job is very different than, oh, shiznit, I'm about to get fired.
So it's basically just how you receive the stimulus or the information.
It's essentially the filter. So this is where basically our stories that most of us don't even know we have are silently driving the show. If I work harder and I work longer, says the story, everything will be okay. It's why we can't relax on a Saturday, or we go to retire and we're like, now what? Because our nervous system has literally been amped on adrenaline for 10 or 20 years. And just because you have Saturday doesn't mean your body is going to click off into that happy, relaxed state. That's work. You learn how to not get there, to your point, like through our coaching. Like, things just don't have to have the same impact or meaning, so that, and this is where it matters, we make clear and conscious business decisions that are aligned with our goals.
I agree with you. I don't think anyone can push back against what you're saying. Like, I think everyone resonates with the example of the big client. How can someone change that? Like, the voice in your head, like, kicks on automatically. Like, it's like very few people, I think, have the calmness and the presence of mind to snap in and say, hey, let's forget about the negative stuff. Let's think about the positive stuff. So how can someone change this story they're telling themselves?
Anyone can do anywhere. Let's use a really common example. If you're listening, have you ever accepted a discount that a prospect asked for? The answer would be yes. Now, if you're just starting out and you can't make rent or eat ramen, what I call rent or ramen, then we'll have that conversation. But most of the people listening to your podcast are way beyond rent and ramen. They're comfortable and doing just fine. Right now, the question is, it's about the quality of the experience that we're having. So one, is it working, is the first question. Here's the question I had to retire to learn that hopefully you don't. Does it feel good? Just showing up to work, you and I had that, like, does it feel good? It should feel good. It's your work. It's where you have impact that generates income. It does good things for your team and your clients. Yes, we have hard days, but the whole thing should not have to feel like a grind. So, very much to many of our conversations, we have to reframe the conversation in our head until it really aligns with the conversation we would want to have as an advisor or a leader. If we were thoughtful and reflective and really thought about the best response, the question is, how do we do that more in the moment? Because you don't usually get to be like, hold on for 15 or 20 minutes while I call my coach and I go work this out. So it's that above the line or below the line. So step one, and it's going to seem too simple, and that's the point. Our brains don't like it, which is, are you above or below the line? So track for a week, piece of paper, what feels good, what's happy, joyful, abundant, right? Track what doesn't. 9 times out of 10, what's up here are going to be your genius work, your energy creating, revenue produce activities. There's usually 3, 4, maybe 5 of them. Everything else down here is going to be grindy factory work, what I call energy draining work. It's not super additive to the business. It doesn't add a ton of impact. You don't like doing it. It drains your energy. For a lot of advisors, right, they like prospecting and talking to clients. They could do it on. I could talk to you for hours and hours. We all know, right? I would not get tired. Ask me to write a really boring report, and I want to put a pencil in my ear in about 7 seconds, right? We all know what our energy creating activities are, and we know what our energy draining are. So, first thing we do to impact leadership effectiveness is I just get you to stop doing energy draining activities. Now, yeah, we got to look at your client model and your team model and what you want to do with your time. And you got to make some decisions like, oh, do I want to be full time as an advisor? Do I want to spend my time training and mentoring our internal advisors? Do I want to focus on my CEO and my growth officer role? Right? If we know what seat we want to sit in, what's energy creating, revenue producing, and typically impactful, and we build around that, which is just a whole right structural conversation, then we're in a situation where we can actually succeed and be a lot more satisfied. So let's use that prospect example. So what happens is we have this invisible force field where we're like, why are we working so hard? Right? Like in the beginning, you did a few things, you got great success. The bigger you get, you're like, wow, I work harder and harder. And it's because we're making incremental decisions, many of which are a crisis of confidence that are not aligned with our goal and take us away. Good example. Prospect, right? I see this in little firms. I see it in multi-billion dollar firms. So we've agreed we don't spend all the time we want with our top clients. Now we're going to have a client event. And in that client event, all those top clients are going to get a gold star in their name badge. And we're going to put one of their name tags at every table. And at the end of the event, right, you as the advisor are going to get up. And instead of saying thank you for coming and doing the handshake samba line, you're going to say thank you for coming tonight. Really appreciate you being clients of the firm. But instead of coming up and thanking me and the staff when we're done, I would like you to find the person at your table with the gold star. And I would like you to thank them because their fees are underwriting your relationship with our firm. And then we all go like, oh, and I use that again as a behavioral example. So to your point, if you track your behavior for a week, you're going to see what's above the line and below the line. Step one is just owning your state. This is going to sound too simple. Step one is acknowledging when you're below the line. Hey, the prospect called, or I was in that prospect meeting today and the prospect asked for discount and I got through it just fine, but I did not like that moment. It felt icky and sticky and I didn't like it. And then we can go, okay, what about that moment created the stuck in the first place? Like, why didn't it feel good? Like, people should be able to say no to you if you have a good sales process and and you go through that and someone says no, I'm like, great, I trust them. I delivered value. I explained what we can do. Like, I have great process for filtering ideal clients. Like, if you went through our entire process, which is thoughtful and on purpose, where we delivered all the value that we could, and you genuinely don't want to work with us, why would I feel bad in that moment? I would be like, well, our process really worked. Yes, you're going to every once in a while lose someone you're like, wow. But at the end of the day, I said with all love and respect, it's a game of numbers. If you're in a growing firm, you're not going to close 100% of clients. You're just not. The goal is 70% or better, right? You want a consistent pipeline of clients and a 70% or better closing rate. Behavior seeps into all of it. One, if I'm aware that it's happening, hey, you know what? As I look at my schedule this week, when I got pushback from the team or my partner or a prospect, or I had that conversation with my spouse, that's when I felt like I went below the line. Now we can, at a leadership level, start to assess what are the stories. Hey, it turns out that many of us who are very successful, although we're very confident and we're very good at what we do, sometimes there's that voice that says, you're an imposter, someone's going to find out, you're not good enough. We all deal with some level of that. We just don't typically know it. We don't address it. We don't face it, acknowledge it, and go, actually, that's BS. That's not true at all. I'm actually pretty good at what I do. I'm going to add a lot of value. We can only add value to a certain set of clients because we want to provide consistent, reliable value to the clients. So the stories we tell ourselves shrink us from making decisions that are actually aligned with our vision and goals. So this is going to blow everyone's mind, but think about this as you go forward. I will argue all day long that most of the hard work that we pay as leaders and founders, that tax, if you will, isn't a required tax on admission. It is the result of a series of compromises, little choices that were not aligned with our decision that compounded into hard work. We just don't see the sum of those decisions until we listen to a podcast or we have a consultant come in. I see it every single day. So Michael and I think you know, where we've got our leader.
This is Michael Kitces, right?
Yeah, that's it. So I've been coaching with him for about 6 years. He's almost twice. His business is slightly different, but just tells you what's possible when you really unleash the vision and then are willing to build a business that supports that vision. But leaders is essentially like 7+ firm founders, and he's our executive this year. Right? We're like taking them through a roadmap of doing this growth and change. I share this because it's an example that's going to really resonate with most of your audience. First thing we do, this is going to sound crazy. We spend the first 6 months aligning the vision and the client model. Now, here's why. To your point around how we start to correct, awareness is what allows us to ask ourselves if we have alignment. Does the business I built align with what I want? For example, right? 25 people and leaders this year. We're going through the business vision. How big do you want to be? Fast do you want to get there? Average client, the details. And one of them, this is very common. Average client size is 11,000. Great client size. Goal over 10 years is get to 30,000, right?
30,000 in fee, right? And investable assets.
Yeah. So over 10 years, I was like, over 10 years, that's totally doable. You could get there faster, but 10 years is fine. Their minimum on the same piece of paper, this happens 80% of the time I ask a firm to fill out a vision document, something doesn't add up in the math. Their minimum client fee is $7,500. They don't want to raise it. They're hesitant to raise it because they want to help everyone. It turns out when we had the conversation, your average is 11, your goal is 30. A minimum of 7,500 moves you backwards every time, right? So for every 10 of these clients, you're going to have 30 of these clients. And then that means we're going to have to service this sheet, right? And so there's just a lot of business and structure conversations there. So we go through this exercise of really looking at, you can't mathematically have a $7,500 minimum and raise your average from 11,000 over time, right? So step one is I ask them, as I do people, like, hey, when you drafted this doc, like what landed on the page? And it's like, that's just where I landed. That was 10, 15% more than last year. Very rarely, Lewis, does anyone stop and assess the journey and whether things are aligned. And what I mean by that, when we started, we had a big goal. I want a big house and good money and a nice job and a spouse. I call it the box problem. It's what's next. We don't ever stop and ask. So you start here, you don't have a lot, you get here, you get the house, the money, the nice business, the good income. And then all of a sudden, all that energy, like you just feel like even though you're putting in all this energy, because it gets trapped in the box, incremental efforts. So those points, right? 2x, 3x, or 10x it's so cliche, right? We've got to undo the box, if you will. So that energy is going through it. So what happens is we never stop, right? So leaders go through this exercise and we're now challenging in a good way. I call it stress testing the vision, challenging the vision. Like, okay, if we really want this average, what are we going to do with the smaller clients? Number one thing is I'm going to hire advisors or I have hired advisors. So I'm going to put my consultant hat on. You know what happens 9 times? Some of you might be the exception. 9 times out of 10, when you hire junior advisors or younger advisors to manage smaller clients, they're basically just covering their own overhead. We are literally, right, creating extra work so that we can keep these clients. And do you know what the story is when we dig into why we have all these legacy clients plus our current clients plus, right, the clients we want to grow into? 9 times out of the 10, the story is some version of, I feel guilty. I got too big for my britches. If I do that, I'll be a bad person. I cannot tell you how many times I've been in like deep consultant, having a analysis, advisor capacity, clients per advisor. What's our average? Like we've got to change these numbers to get to X. And then we'll stop when that resistance, that invisible force field of, okay, the business case says I should do this, but it feels really uncomfortable. It's always because it triggers a story that's negative. It's a below the line story. You can't, you shouldn't, it makes you a bad person. Who do you think you are? The clients are going to tell all their friends, and then they're going to tell the COIs, and everyone's going to hate you. All your clients are going to leave. You're going to get eaten by a hungry tiger and you're going to die. Is literally what happens in your head when the prospect asks for a discount, when the client, all of that takes us from our conscious brain where we make rational aligned decisions. Hey, right. So I had a conversation with that firm about a partial book sale. Wildly uncomfortable conversation for them, right? $47,000 worth of clients. They were like, this is what I call averaging. If you're listening to this, is where that ease of your success is probably hiding. We do this thing called averaging. They said, Stephanie, It's just $47,000. Another multi-million dollar firm. It's just $47,000. And I was like, you're right. You pay your taxes by the time you divide it. It's just not that big a deal. It's that growth initiative that we wanted. And by the way, they're very small clients. How much time? Literally did some tabulations. It's like 3 to 4 weeks of their time. So I said, whether you realized it or not, you were trading a month of your life. Like you could go on a holiday for 30 days and nothing would be different in your practice. And it's 47,000 divided by 2 after taxes. We're talking about $15,000. So you're giving up a month of your life to keep these clients so that you can take home $15,000, but you can't grow the top clients. You can't give your top clients that level of service we just built because you're so busy. And then, by the way, you're exhausted because you spent all your time below the line. They can literally take 3-4 weeks of your time. We just had a client who they were under on fees. They didn't want to be the bad guy. $170,000 with a nominal, not a huge fee increase, just a nominal fee that still kept them below the highest point of the range. So you'll tell me, whoever you are listening, you'll be like, it's not that big a deal. That's your brain selling you short. That is your story saying, don't do it. You have a cave, you have berries, don't be greedy. Whatever your negative story is, every time you go to up level, it will stuck you. Personally, professionally, doesn't matter. That's the work. So we can come in at a business level. Man, I can build strategy and structure all day long. I was good at that. I built a firm that was really good at that at scale, which is hard to do. The difference now where people are like, how do you get those crazy results? Like how do Michael 10X twice? Like how do people like 2X and take 100 days off in a leadership position? And I'm like, choices.
It almost sounds like one of the keys to success, aside from mindset, is doing less. It's eliminating. So whether it's eliminating the things that are below the line for you and energy draining, or it's eliminating clients that don't fit you, eliminating certain responsibilities. And the more you take away, the more you have time to focus on the above the line things that are the highest and best use of yourself. Let me ask you a question though, and probably challenge this theory a little bit. This might be me averaging or rationalizing. What would you say to someone who does an activity, let's say it's prospecting or it's deep financial planning work, and you don't really like it, but you're the best person and the most credible person within your firm to do it. And if you don't do it, it's just not going to be done, or it's not going to get done in a way that you can do it. So it's a double-edged sword because you're good at it, but you don't like it. What would you say to that person?
I totally get that. When Michael and I started, I'm just using him as an example because everyone knows him for the most part. There were 2 people on his team. Now there's 28 people on his team.
Wow.
Here's the secret to success. You just described it simply and beautifully. Thank you. You're better at that than I am. It's very simple. It's leverage. Leverage is positions. Who are our clients? What will our fees be and what services will we provide? Relative to the goals we have for revenue, income, and time off are your core business positions. Those are the 7 things I need to know to be like, you can do this, you can't do this, you could do this, but it'll be harder and it'll take you longer. But if you want to do that, as long as you know that you're making that exception, like, God bless you, go ahead and do it. I just need you to know when you do it, right? So we're not looking at like the PE guy ledger where it's like, let's carve everything to the bone and get rid of those little clients because they're not like, no, oh my gosh, that's the crazy thing. I cannot tell you, we're doing right transition, we're doing fee transitions, service transitions, right? Services go up or down, advisor transitions in or out. I call them the 3 terrifying transitions because the thought of them, the mere mention makes your knees knock a little bit for the like, oh God, no, Steph, I can't do that. We do them all the time. No joke. I cannot make this up. Do you know what the response on the other side is? I'm going to knock on wood. I do this every single time because I don't want to blow the track record. 30 years. I have done this, no joke, thousands of times. Every time the response is some version of, that was a non-event. So one of our leaders just did this. We prepped him for a fee increase. We ran the spreadsheet that said if 25% of them hate you and leave, it's still going to be okay. That's probably not going to happen because it's never happened, right? There's like 1 or 2 clients. Maybe he'll be like, really? Every 1,000 clients, someone will push back. And then 24 hours later, they're gone. One of our leaders just had that. He was like, this person really pushed back. And they're like, you're leaving me? And he was like, Here's the good story. You and your brain tell yourself that you're a greedy grubber if you leave them. I'll break that down in 7 seconds. You're going to tell me things like, Stephanie, they're really not that big a deal. They don't take that much time. I'm going to skinny down their service model. We're not even going to notice. And I'm like, great. Could you tell that to them? Hey, Bob and Jane, you've been a valued client of this for many years. When I took you on, it was a great fit. We've developed a lot of complexity in our expertise and our knowledge, and our fees have risen to reflect that, which let's note is a fair thing. And you know what? The services that we have and the fees that we have, they're actually way more than you need. But instead of doing the good guy thing and telling you that and referring you to someone who's right where you are and who will spend extra time loving on you because they're me 10 years ago, we actually had a meeting internally and we decided that you really don't take that much time. It's not that big a deal. We're going to skinny down your service model so that Bob over there looks at you once a year and I have nothing to do with you, but we get to keep you. No, oh my God, no, you would not, because you wouldn't feel in integrity. You're not doing it on purpose. I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. I'm doing that to impress upon you the point, which is those stories will silently slip in and tell you literally what you're doing is great and helpful and valuable. And it is because it's serving your need to not feel like the bad guy. But it turns out that's not the good guy thing to do. The good guy thing to do or gal is to sit across from that couple and have a really candid conversation that says, gosh, we've really loved having you be a client of our firm. As like things are going up in inflation and expenses. So we as a firm are having to raise our fees for the first time ever. 90% of you get to say that, by the way, for the first time ever, so that we can maintain the depth of service and quality and expertise and the team and obviously just the cost of living. And what we realize in evaluating that in our service model is that the fees that we will need to charge you to get to our minimum, Bob and Susan, are quite honestly more than you need where you are in life. And the truth is, we just don't feel good about that. And a year or two, you're probably not going to feel good about that. And we have some options for you. So, option A, if you want to pay the fee, like if you want the fuller planning process and you genuinely feel like there's value there, we'd love to keep you as a client. If you don't feel that, if your goals or your budget at this point, if that doesn't meet them, we want you to know we completely understand and we won't take it personally. We've actually got some resources, or there's an advisor who's really right at a place where he'd be a great fit for you and the level of needs, and honestly will be just a better fit for your budget. And there's always someone you can find, which is the other right objection, but separate conversation. And you know what happens? 99.99999% of the time, they say thank you.
I'm thinking about that. Like, you're doing them a favor. No one wants to be second fiddle or being ripped off. So you're giving them a choice to opt into this higher model that works for you, or self-select that it's not the right fit.
And some of them will, by the way. And our brain tells us I can't find that person. Not true. Do it all the time. B, they're going to win the lottery, or their dad's going to win the lottery and I'm going to lose the money. I could have a whole conversation about how there's plenty of money right now. And if you got to wait 10 years, your cost of return is 15 years from now. And most of you will be retired by then. It's just some BS that your brain tells you. True story. This morning, our leaders do a Friday check-in, right? They tell us what's going on. Read one of their check-ins. I cannot make this up, this morning. And it said, turned a prospect away because he wasn't a good fit, had that conversation. He wrote me a 5-star review.
Very
If that
cool.
person happens all the time, if that person's brother wins the lottery and gets a bunch of money, are they going to refer them to the guy that you 10 years ago that you referred them to? Or are they going to refer them to you, who works with bigger clients, who has a healthy dose of integrity? Without
Yep.
hesitation, they're coming to you. So our brains have this incredible way of flipping the script on us, where we do things that, when I call it reframing, that make perfect sense in the moment. And when I pull back the curtain and I'm like, what was the goal? We were like,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it is 99% of the time habit and conditioning. A prospect calls up. You've done this 1,000 times, right? But the first time a prospect challenged you was back in the rent and ramen days. And now here's the crazy thing. So true for all of you now, for being right in our little circle of trust over here. You looked at your peers. What was the market relative to your clients and the services, right? You did some homework. You put that in this thing called an ADV. You filed it with a state and then the SEC. Like, literally the professional version of laminating it. You say, this is what I'm worth for the value that I'm providing. A prospect walks in and goes, love that. I spent time. I went to your website. I had our learn more call. Here I am on Zoom or across from you. I've done a meeting, 2 meetings. We've done the whole thing. I love that value. Love it. Tiny problem. Could I just get a little, I want all the value, but I want to pay a little bit less than everyone else, but don't tell them because they were too stupid to ask. Just when I call, love me the same. Never think about this again and give me all the care and faculty that you would all those other schmucks. Are you going to say yes? No. Every time people are like, I would not say yes. And I'm like, you say yes every time a prospect asks you for a discount and you don't say no. Because what you're saying is, I set my fees, but you, the random person, challenged me. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't actually mean it. Silly me. Just kidding. I want your business so bad, I'll let you dictate my prices.
That's a great point.
So when I reframe it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
One more question for you. This one we'll put in the category of maybe it's a little bit of a selfish question, but that's okay. You're inspiring me to talk about my value and the like. So a lot of what you're saying around losing clients, what's hitting home for me is the way advisors who are considering a transition often think about a transition. I've seen books on it about loss aversion. Like you think about what you're going to lose much more than what you can gain. I'm super unhappy with my firm. I think I can grow faster elsewhere. I found this amazing model, but what's stopping me is what if my clients don't come? What if 10% of people don't come? What would you say to an advisor who's stuck in this limbo? Because every advisor worries about that. It's their life's work. I get it. And I always say advisors knew with certainty that 90%, 95% of their clients would follow. People would move every 2 or 3 years, but you don't know that. So how would you coach or condition someone who is unhappy? They're looking at making a change for the right reasons, but what's stopping them is the fear of loss.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the question that you asked, which I got on a tangent on, but to bring that back, I do that sometimes. I get excited, right? Which is if you're the lead person and I'm saying this because you asked questions that Michael and I are literally asking, right? This group on Thursday and Friday, they're coming to Park City. When we think about transitions inside the team, right? So if you're the prospector, right, in that, or you're the lead advisor and you're turning that over to someone, there's a risk factor. That's resistance that surfaces, that really uncomfortable feeling when you think about making a big change, whether it's teaching the next generation to do prospecting. You and I have had this conversation, right? House cats versus hunter cats. You're not going to teach a house cat to be a hunter cat, but you have to replace that skill set. There's a very important business conversation about how you replace the growth engine in a firm, different strategies, but it's a very important leadership conversation. The transition conversation is the same thing. My title is Chief Possibility Officer because A, the others were really boring, and B, it's just me. B, I thought it actually captured the whole, right, from business to behavior of what we do and what is so important to me, which is, can you step into your next level of mindset thinking, essentially, right? If mindset freaks you out, just think elevate your thinking, elevate your business, elevate your life. Every ounce of research says that if you change your thoughts, I call it reframing from the negative, I can't, it'll be hard, to the positive. So here's the question that I asked Michael. I'm allowed to share this from our coaching, right? One of his big inflection point moments. He had 3 people, the editor who did all the editing at the time, right? His big point of leverage gave notice. And he was like, oh my God, who's going to do this job? And I was like, I'm going to flip that around on you. I said, I know it's going to be really annoying, but your brain doesn't do it. So it's my job. Your brain immediately goes below the line. What if bad stuff happens? Do you know what our brains never do? They always see the obstacle. They rarely look at the opportunity. They see the problems. They don't see the possibility. Now, sometimes when we're in that vision flow above the line state, those things happen. You're like, let's start a firm. This is the year to make this transition. It's time, right? And the difference often is just a readiness factor. Sometimes we're getting ready to get ready. The fundamental question is, what's the resistance? And the way that you figure that out is you simply flip the script and you say, what would make this the best? What would have to happen for this to be the best thing that ever happened? And then it will be like, well, I'm going to go from X and being captive to having a value of Y and have this freedom. And yes, there's going to be 12 months of work, but I've got a roadmap. And let's be honest, I've done hard things before. There's always a bit of breakdown before the breakthrough into the next level. By definition, we as leaders have to break down our mindset. Otherwise, we can't see the next level. We can see it, which is where the frustration is. We can't get to it because we can't see with clarity that series of choices. We are subconsciously compromising day in and day out. And the compounding effect of that is complexity and dilution. And we are not optimizing our practices for margins, for capacity margins or joy on a structural level. If you can reframe, the question becomes, what is it? Here are the three questions I ask everyone, right? If you're at a certain size, right? What do you want to build and why? What do you want? So you're all going to spend, unless you're retiring, separate conversation. I like the 10-year question, not because the plans are set in stone, because it's a forcing mechanism for your brain. At 7.5% interest, you're all going to double in 10 years absent any intervention. Most of you at 25% will double in 3 years. Most of you will double between 3 and 5 years just through share of wallets, referrals, and the markets being kind to you. So if you're sitting on 400 million, you're going to be at 800 million. If you're at 1.5 billion, you're going to be at 3. That's absent intervention. Most of you are grown. What we have to recognize as leaders is the train is going whether we're on it or not. So if we can sit in that space, that's the skill set development. Can I learn to, I call it catch and correct. Can I just learn? Oh, I do it all the time. My family knows it. I'm having a below the line moment. Be right back. I catch it. Whew. And then I have strategies, right, where I can just breathe. When I used to have a driveway, right, in Costa Rica, I'd drive in. I'd be like, here's the rule. I'm not coming in the house below the line. If you see me sitting out there for 20 minutes, it means I'm recalibrating. Might be 2 minutes. Now I'm upstairs in my loft, right? I'm not going downstairs. So I've learned to constantly check my state. I know at the end of the day where I have a lot of back-to-back calls, I know I need breaks in between or I'll be talking twice as fast at the end of the day. Literally. And I'm like, why is that happening? And I realize because I'm going from here and I'm not processing. I'm not regrounding. So I'm going from this fun conversation to this deep, got to solve problem kind of. By the end of the day, I'm like the fire hose is Greg. So I have to, number one thing we can do, ask Harvard Mind Body Institute, very real. Number one thing you can do to bring yourself back down into that neutral state, breathe. Breathing grounds our mind. This is a coachy conversation. Most of us are ahead, meaning that 95, I know, because this was me and it's me on days. I have to catch it and bring it down. Notice when I start talking fast, I'm like, oh, I'm in my head. Bring it down because I notice like not all of you want to listen to me at 150 miles an hour. I'll be like, I'm getting really excited again. I need to bring it down. That's what I know about myself. I get really going and then I gotta be like, oh, I got to check what's my pace? Where am I on time? I have to pull myself back into conscious mode. If you've ever pulled into your driveway and been like, how did I get here? That's what I'm talking about. We just go through the motions each day. So if we breathe, so I talk about the belly breaths, like the deep breaths we're breathing into our stomach. Just look up diaphragmatic breathing. The Navy SEALs has the 4 box breath, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. You will instantly, if we had more time, I would do it with everyone. 3 deep breaths. Your state will change. Mine's already changed. And the only thing I did was talk to you about it. I was like, oh, catch. Correct. Oh, that prospect called. Shit. Oh, wait, hold on a minute. Let's reground. I want to go in calm, conscious, clear, and confident about who I am and the value. I'm not going in apologizing, or you need to be able to quote your fees, stand your ground, manage your team without apology or hesitation. So when you're looking at making a transition, your brain is going to give you every single reason that you shouldn't. It's going to be like, Lewis is a really nice guy, and I know a lot of people use him with great success, but what if we're the story? We have a berries, we don't need better berries, and for most people, it's not just about the income, it's about the experience and the impact. We want agency, the most powerful word we have. If you are thinking about making a transition, it's because you want agency over your practice, your client experience, usually your marketing. and the value that you build for clients and that you build for yourself. If you're thinking about transitioning your right? So we have to reframe the questions. Michael quotes this all the time. It's one of my favorite sayings, which is, if you ask better questions, you'll get better answers. So let's use your question. You were like, hey, prospecting. Many of you are like, I got to teach the next generation. I don't know. What am I going to do? Lewis, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but I want you to imagine you get up right now, you walk across the room and you lay on the floor and you say to your team, I'm in the hospital for 1.5 years, or I'm dead. Now what? You have to solve the problems, people. The difference is, said with all love, you're going to take your medicine now. You're going to take more of it later. You're going to add complexity. You're going to create stress. You're going to dilute value. You're going to hurt the G2 team. You're going to wait too many years to finally make the transition. What does everybody say on the other side? Oh my God, Lewis, I wish I had done this sooner. Your brain inserts the stories that shrink you. So if you're listening and those are the stories and oh my God, and what about? I'm guessing Lewis has answers for those. People have survived. You've seen lots of them move to the other side. Here's the honest answer. The grass may be greener. It still has to be mowed. There's work. You've got to set up your business and take care of things. And the good news is you've done that before. You can do it again, and you're going to have a lot more agency on the other side. And agency means you then have influence over everything else: business, bank account, clients, experience, growth, team. And for most people, that's what they really, I think, are seeking when they make transitions. They want the power to control their own destiny without being handicapped or handcuffed by someone else's rules and regulations and compliance that meets the lowest common denominator, right? It's safe for everyone, but nothing interesting can happen. After 10, 20, 30 years, even when you're making good money, there's just a point where there's a next level where you see what's possible, the freedom, the impact, the joy, the economics. And you're like, is it worth it?
Well said. This is great. I had a list of like 20 questions I was going to take you through. I worked really hard on them. I think I asked 2 of them because you were just on a roll, but so much wisdom. And I feel charged up and I feel better just listening to you. I think whether you're an advisor, a manager, an executive in the industry, or just a random person listening on the sidelines, there's so much wisdom that you shared. So thank you so much for being gracious with your time. Your energy is infectious. And until next time.
Thanks so much for the invite. I appreciate it.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibilities seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.